For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council ruled unopposed. Ancient races like the crystalline Zephyrians and the energy-based Luminari had built an empire spanning millions of worlds connected by quantum gates that bent space itself. They had cataloged every sentient species, mapped every habitable system, and established laws that governed all intelligent life. But in the darkest corners of their archives, buried beneath layers of classified data, lay whispered tales of a mythical species. Stories spoke of bipedal creatures from a lost world called Earth. Being so primitive they used crude metal ships and chemical propulsion, yet so fierce they could tear through advanced civilizations like paper. The Council scholars dismissed these as folklore, cautionary tales invented to frighten young cadets. After all, how could such primitive beings survive in a galaxy where wars were fought with planet crackers and stellar manipulators? How could creatures who supposedly still used projectile weapons stand against races that wielded the fundamental forces of reality itself? The answer was simple: they couldn't. Humanity was nothing more than a ghost story, a legend born from the fevered imagination of ancient chroniclers, until the day their fleet darkened the skies above the Council's capital world and the galaxy learned that some myths are born from truth too terrifying to believe. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came from the Outer Rim monitoring station orbiting Kepler 442b. Junior technician Vex High of the Crystalline Collective had been manning the deep space sensors for what felt like an eternity, watching the endless void for signs of pirate activity or rogue asteroids. The job was mind-numbingly boring, which was exactly why he'd been assigned to it after his last disciplinary hearing. The readings that appeared on his screen made no sense. 17 distinct signatures were approaching from the direction of the galactic arm designated as Sector 7. Alpha, a region that had been marked as barren for over 2 millennia. The signatures were massive, each one registering as large as a Zephyrian battlecruiser, but their energy outputs were completely alien. Instead of the clean quantum fusion drives used by every civilized species, these objects seemed to be powered by some kind of primitive chemical combustion system mixed with what looked like controlled nuclear explosions. Vekshai's crystalline form flickered with confusion as he ran the scans 3 more times. The results remained the same. These ships, if they could even be called ships, were approaching at a significant fraction of light speed using technology that should have been impossible. Chemical drives simply couldn't achieve such velocities, and the radiation signatures suggested they were somehow harnessing stellar fusion in a way that defied every known principle of safe space travel. Supervisor Kethran, Vex Hay called across the monitoring station, his voice creating harmonic resonances in his crystal matrix. "I'm reading some unusual contacts on the deep field sensors. Could you take a look at these readings?" Supervisor Kethran, a veteran Zephyrian whose gossamer wings had carried her through 3 decades of military service, glided over to examine the data. Her compound eyes processed the information in milliseconds, and her antennae began to twitch with agitation. "This has to be a sensor malfunction," she muttered, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Run a full diagnostic on the array." The diagnostic came back clean. Every system was functioning perfectly. The contacts were real, and they were getting closer. "Sir," Vekshai said, his form now pulsing with nervous energy, "should we alert the Council Defense Force? These readings don't match any known ship designs in our database." Kethran's wings fluttered as she considered the implications. The galaxy had been at peace for over 8 centuries. The last major conflict had been the Dominion Wars, where several upstart species had attempted to challenge the Council's authority and been swiftly crushed by superior technology and overwhelming force. Since then, any new species discovered had been quickly integrated into the Council's hierarchy or eliminated if they proved too aggressive. But these readings suggested something entirely different. The approaching vessels weren't using any recognizable technology, yet they were clearly capable of interstellar travel. More disturbing still, preliminary scans indicated they were heavily armed with weapons that the computer couldn't even classify. "Send a priority transmission to Nexus Prime," Kethran ordered finally. Alert the Defense Command that we have unknown contacts approaching from Sector 7, Alpha. Include all sensor data and request immediate backup. As Vex-I began transmitting the alert, neither of them noticed the smaller contacts that had separated from the main fleet and were now moving on silent, running toward their monitoring station. 3 light years away, aboard the UES Indomitable, Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen studied the tactical display with the calm intensity that had made her legend throughout human space. The massive dreadnought around her hummed with barely contained power, its fusion drives pushing them toward their destination at 15% of light speed. Behind her, 16 more ships of the United Earth Fleet followed in perfect formation, each one a masterpiece of human engineering and determination. "Admiral," called Commander Torres from the sensor station, "we're picking up transmissions from what appears to be a monitoring post ahead. They've detected us and are broadcasting on multiple frequencies." Chen nodded grimly. After 3 years of preparation and planning, the moment of first contact had finally arrived. The data they'd gathered from the derelict alien ship found drifting in the Kuiper Belt had led them here, to this galaxy-spanning empire that had apparently never heard of humanity. That was about to change. "Any response to our hails, Commander?" "Negative, sir. They're not responding to any of our communication attempts. The broadcasts appear to be alerts of some kind, possibly warning other ships about our presence." Chen turned to face her bridge crew, men and women who had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. They had traveled through the quantum tunnel discovered in the outer system, emerging in space dominated by alien civilizations that possessed technology centuries ahead of anything humanity had ever imagined. The logical thing to do would be to turn around and flee back to Earth, to hide behind their defensive networks and pray they were never discovered. But humanity had never chosen the logical path when the survival of their species was at stake. "Launch reconnaissance drones," Chen ordered. "I want full-spectrum analysis of their technology and defensive capabilities. And Commander Torres, begin broadcasting the message we prepared. Let them know we're here to talk." As the human fleet continued its approach, the galaxy was about to receive its first lesson in human diplomacy. Throughout their history, humans had always preferred to negotiate from a position of strength, and the 17 ships of Earth's finest were about to demonstrate exactly what that meant. On the monitoring station, Vex-I was frantically trying to establish communication with the approaching vessels, when his sensors detected something that made his crystal form flash bright red with alarm. "Supervisor!" "The unknowns have launched smaller craft. They're heading directly for our position." Catherine's wings spread wide in a defensive posture as she processed this information. Launching fighters or boarding craft was an act of aggression according to galactic law. These unknown beings were clearly hostile. "Activate the station's defensive shields," she ordered, "and transmit an emergency code to all nearby patrol ships." "We may be under attack," but as the approaching craft came within visual range, both aliens found themselves staring at something that shouldn't exist. The vessels were clearly of artificial origin, but they moved with a grace and precision that seemed almost alive. Their hulls were a matte black that absorbed sensor pings, making them difficult to track, and they were accelerating at rates that should have turned any organic crew into paste. "What are they?" Vex-I whispered, his voice barely audible through his crystal matrix. Before Catherine could answer, the communication array crackled to life with a transmission unlike anything they had ever heard. The voice was organic, clearly biological in origin, but it spoke with an authority that sent chills through both aliens. "Unknown station, this is Captain Jackson of the United Earth Forces. We are representatives of humanity and we come seeking dialogue with your governing body. Please respond if you are capable of interspecies communication." The words were transmitted in perfect galactic standard, a language that supposedly only council members knew. Yet these beings, these humans, spoke it as if they had been studying the galaxy for years. Catherine's voice trembled as she activated the response channel. "Unknown vessels, this is monitoring station Kepler." 442B of the Galactic Council Defense Network. You are approaching restricted space without proper authorization codes. State your intentions and prepare to be boarded for inspection. The response came immediately, and it sent ice through the supervisor's gossamer wings. Station Kepler. 442B, we appreciate your response. However, we must decline your boarding request. We are not subject to Council authority, as humanity is not a member of your organization. We repeat, we are seeking dialogue with your leadership. We have traveled a very long way to have this conversation, and we would prefer to have it peacefully. As those words echoed through the monitoring station, HFY began searching frantically through the galactic database, looking for any reference to a species called humanity. The results he found made his crystal form dim with disbelief. There, buried in the deepest archives, were the ancient tales he'd heard as a young crystal formation. Stories of the mythical warriors from a lost world called Earth, beings who fought with primitive weapons but possessed a ferocity that had supposedly driven them to conquer their entire star system before vanishing into the void. But those were just stories, legends told to frighten children and entertain adults. They couldn't be real. The sensor readings suggested otherwise. As Captain Jackson's reconnaissance drones performed their silent survey of the monitoring station, gathering detailed information about Council technology and defensive capabilities, both sides prepared for a first contact that would reshape the galaxy forever. Neither the aliens with their advanced technology nor the humans with their primitive but effective ships understood the full implications of this moment. But deep in the Council archives, ancient warning algorithms triggered by the word humanity began sending priority alerts across the galaxy. Forgotten protocols, buried for millennia, suddenly activated. Emergency sessions were called on a dozen worlds as the galaxy's leadership tried to understand how a myth had suddenly become reality. On Earth, the message had been simple when Admiral Chen's fleet departed: find them before they find us. Learn their weaknesses, and if necessary, show them that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans said they came in peace, they brought enough firepower to ensure that peace would be on their terms. The Grand Council chamber on Nexus Prime had not seen such chaos in over 4 centuries. Representatives from dozens of species filled the massive amphitheater, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the universal translators struggled to process. Crystalline beings chimed in harmonic frequencies, energy creatures pulsed with emotional colors, and the various biological species spoke in languages that ranged from melodic to utterly alien. At the center of it all stood High Arbiter Zakthul, a member of the ancient ethereal race whose species had been among the original founders of the Galactic Council. His translucent form flickered with the strain of maintaining order as more reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Silence, Zakhtul's voice resonated through the chamber, enhanced by psychic amplifiers that carried his authority directly into the minds of every representative present. The noise gradually died down as all attention focused on the floating display screens that surrounded the chamber. We are faced with an unprecedented situation, Zakthul continued, his form shifting to a more solid appearance as he drew upon ancient powers. 6 hours ago, our monitoring stations detected the approach of unknown vessels from the galactic rim. These ships appear to be crewed by a species that claims to be humanity. A ripple of disbelief passed through the chamber. Representative Quindar of the Mechanical Collective raised one of her mechanical appendages. High Arbiter, surely you don't mean to suggest that the mythical humans have actually appeared. Those stories are clearly fictional, created to... The evidence suggests otherwise, Zakthul interrupted, causing the chamber's lights to dim as he accessed the central archives. Computer, display classification, Archive Omega 7. The holographic displays around the chamber lit up with ancient texts and star charts that most representatives had never seen before. The documents were written in the oldest known forms of galactic standard, some dating back nearly 3 millennia. These records, Zakthul explained, were compiled during the early expansion period, when our ancestors first began exploring the Outer Rim territories. They describe encounters with a species that matches the beings now approaching our space. Fleet Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Defense Corps stood up, her gossamer wings creating patterns of light as they moved. High Arbiter, with respect, these documents describe impossible capabilities. Ships that can somehow survive direct hits from plasma cannons, warriors who fight with projectile weapons yet somehow defeat energy-shielded opponents. These cannot be accurate accounts. Perhaps not, Zaktul agreed. But consider this. How did these unknown ships acquire perfect knowledge of galactic standard? How did they locate our monitoring stations and sectors that have been classified for centuries? And most disturbing of all, how did they develop faster-than-light travel using what our sensors indicate as primitive fusion technology? The questions hung in the air like a physical weight. Representative Sulkov of the Dominion Remnants, one of the few species that remembered the last major galactic war, leaned forward with obvious concern. What are their apparent intentions, High Arbiter? Have they made any demands or threats? That is perhaps the most puzzling aspect of this situation, Zaktul replied, manipulating the displays to show communication logs. Their messages have been courteous but firm, and they have declined to submit to standard inspection protocols.
Declined. Commander Veltar's wings flared with indignation.
No species has the right to decline Council authority within Council space. If they will not submit to inspection, then they must be treated as hostile forces. That may be problematic, Zaktul said carefully. Our preliminary analysis of their fleet suggests military capabilities that are concerning. The displays shifted to show detailed sensor readings from the monitoring stations. The data painted a picture that made seasoned military officers uncomfortable. The human ships were heavily armored with materials that absorbed energy weapons with alarming efficiency. Their hulls showed no signs of the quantum computing networks that all known starships required for faster-than-light travel. Yet they had somehow crossed interstellar distances. Most disturbing of all were the weapons signatures. Instead of the clean energy weapons used by civilized species, these ships carried what appeared to be kinetic projectile systems, nuclear warheads, and some kind of exotic matter manipulation devices that the sensors couldn't fully identify. Seneth, the Council's chief xenobiologist, activated her translation matrix with a series of clicking sounds. High Arbiter, I've been reviewing the archaeological data from the rim sectors. There are several worlds in that region that show signs of having been inhabited by a technological species within the last few thousand years. However, those worlds now appear to be completely lifeless. The implication sent a chill through the chamber. Representative Morgath of the Hive Collective buzzed with agitation. Are you suggesting these humans destroyed their own worlds? Not destroyed, Dr. Zenith replied, her tentacles manipulating data streams with practiced precision.
Stripped. Every useful resource has been extracted with extraordinary efficiency.
These worlds have been mined down to their core materials. The level of resource extraction suggests a species with an almost compulsive need to gather and process raw materials. A locust species, whispered Representative Ketmore of the Peaceful Union, his bioluminescent patches flickering with fear. They consume everything in their path and then move on to new territory. High Arbiter Zaktul allowed the speculation to continue for a few moments before calling for order once again. We must deal with facts, not fears. The immediate situation is this. 17 large warships of unknown capability have entered Council space and are requesting an audience with our leadership. How do we respond? We respond with strength, Commander Veltar declared, rising to her full impressive height. Deploy the Third Fleet to intercept these vessels. Show them that the Council will not be intimidated by primitive newcomers. With respect, Commander, interrupted Admiral Thokran of the Stellar Navy, perhaps we should consider a more measured approach. If these beings have traveled from the rim sectors to reach us, they clearly possess capabilities we don't fully understand. It might be wiser to agree to their request for dialogue. And show weakness to an unknown threat? Veltar's voice rose to a pitch that made the universal translators strain. The Council has maintained peace for 8 centuries through strength and clear demonstration of our technological superiority. We cannot appear weak before these primitives. As the debate raged, none of the Council members noticed the small alert that appeared on Dr. Zenith's personal display. Deep scanning protocols had detected something in the sensor data that the automatic systems had initially missed. The human ships weren't just armed with primitive weapons, they were carrying something else. Energy signatures that matched theoretical descriptions of planet-cracking devices, weapons that could destroy entire worlds. Meanwhile, aboard the UES Indomitable, Admiral Chen was receiving reports from the reconnaissance teams that had been deployed throughout the local system. The data they were gathering painted a picture of a galactic civilization that was simultaneously more and less advanced than humanity had expected. "Their defensive networks are impressive," reported Commander Torres as he analyzed the incoming data streams. "Quantum-linked sensor arrays, automated response systems, and what appears to be some kind of instantaneous communication network spanning multiple star systems. What about their military capabilities?" Chen asked, studying the tactical displays that showed Council ship movements throughout the region. "That's where it gets interesting, Admiral. Their ships are fast and well-shielded, but their weapon systems seem to be primarily energy-based. Plasma cannons, particle beams, some kind of exotic matter disruptors. Very clean, very efficient, but, Chen prompted. "They don't seem to understand kinetic warfare at all. Their defensive systems are designed to counter energy weapons and electromagnetic attacks, but they have almost no protection against physical projectiles. And their ship designs prioritize maneuverability over armor thickness." Chen nodded grimly. It was exactly what they had hoped for and feared to find. The galaxy's dominant civilizations had apparently evolved beyond physical conflict, developing weapons and defenses that were elegant and efficient but utterly unprepared for the brutal realities of human warfare. "Any word from the diplomatic team?" Chen asked. "They've received a response from something called the Galactic Council. The aliens want to meet with our representatives, but they're insisting it take place on their terms, in their space, under their security protocols." Admiral Chen considered this for a moment. Every instinct told her it was a trap, that the aliens were trying to lure humanity into a position of weakness where they could be easily eliminated. But the mission parameters were clear: establish contact, assess threats, and secure humanity's future. Very well, she decided, inform the Council that we accept their invitation to dialogue. But make it clear that our negotiations will be conducted as equals. We won't be submitting to their inspection protocols or their security arrangements. "Admiral," Commander Torres said carefully, "what if they refuse to negotiate under those terms?" Chen looked out at the alien stars that surrounded their small fleet, thinking of Earth and the billions of humans counting on them to secure a future among the stars. "Then we'll demonstrate that humanity didn't travel this far to be dismissed as primitives. Our ancestors didn't claw their way up from the Stone Age just to bow before alien overlords." She turned back to her command crew, the same determination that had carried humanity through every crisis in their history burning in her eyes. "If they want to treat this as a demonstration of strength rather than diplomacy, we'll give them a lesson they won't forget. Signal the fleet. All ships are to prepare for combat operations while maintaining defensive postures." As both sides prepared for their first official meeting, neither fully understood what they were about to unleash. The Council believed they were dealing with primitive newcomers who would quickly submit to their authority once they understood the reality of galactic power. The humans believed they were facing a technologically advanced but potentially overconfident enemy that had never encountered truly determined opposition. Both sides were about to discover how wrong they were about each other. The meeting was supposed to take place in neutral space, halfway between the human fleet and the Council's military formation that had assembled to escort the newcomers to formal negotiations. 3 ships from each side would rendezvous at the designated coordinates. The Council would send their newest diplomatic cruiser, escorted by 2 destroyers, while humanity would be represented by the UES Indomitable's shuttle bay commander and 2 frigates. What nobody expected was for everything to go wrong within the first 10 minutes. Commander Sarah Martinez piloted the human diplomatic shuttle with the same precision that had earned her a place aboard humanity's most advanced starship. Behind her sat Ambassador Patricia Wong, a career diplomat who had volunteered for what many considered the most important and dangerous assignment in human history. Their escort consisted of the frigates UES Resolute and UES Defiant, ships small by human standards but still massing over 800 meters and bristling with enough weaponry to level a city. On the Council side, diplomatic envoy Keltharos of the Serene Republic adjusted his ceremonial robes as their cruiser approached the rendezvous point. The elegant Serene vessel, its hull shaped like a graceful flower and powered by clean fusion technology, represented everything the Council believed about civilized spaceflight. Accompanying them were two Zephyrian destroyers, their gossamer hulls shimmering with defensive energy fields. "Human vessels, this is Diplomatic Envoy Keltaros," the alien's melodious voice transmitted across space. "We welcome you to this historic meeting between our civilizations. Please prepare to be scanned for security purposes before we begin formal negotiations." Ambassador Wong looked at Commander Martinez with raised eyebrows. They had been explicitly instructed that humanity would not submit to alien security protocols, especially not when surrounded by unknown weapons and technology. "Envoy Keltharos," Wong responded diplomatically, "we appreciate your welcome and your security concerns. However, as representatives of a sovereign species, we must respectfully decline your scanning procedures. We propose that both sides maintain current positions and begin negotiations via secure communication channels." The response came back immediately, but the tone had shifted from welcoming to stern. "Ambassador Wong, scanning protocols are mandatory for all first contact situations. These procedures are required by galactic law and have been followed by every species encountered in the past 2 millennia. We cannot proceed without compliance." On the bridge of the UES Resolute, Captain James Mackenzie watched the tactical displays with growing unease. The alien ships had been gradually adjusting their positions, and what had initially looked like a standard escort formation was beginning to resemble something much more threatening. "Captain," called Lieutenant Hayes from the sensor station, "I'm reading energy buildup in the alien weapons systems. They're not powering up for an attack, but they're definitely not standing down either." "Any word from the Indomitable?" Mackenzie asked. "Admiral Chen is monitoring the situation. She's given us clearance to defend ourselves if threatened, but we're to avoid initiating hostilities." Mackenzie nodded grimly. Like every officer in the human fleet, he understood the delicate balance they were trying to maintain. They needed to show strength without appearing aggressive, demonstrate their capabilities without starting a war that humanity might not be able to win. "All stations, maintain ready status. And Hayes, keep a close eye on those destroyers. If they so much as twitch in our direction, I want to know immediately." Back on the diplomatic shuttle, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Envoy Keltharos had been joined by what appeared to be a military commander, a crystalline being whose form flickered with obvious agitation. "Human representatives," the new voice transmitted, its tones creating harmonic resonances that the universal translator rendered as barely controlled anger. "I am Defense Commander Zerkoth. You will submit to scanning procedures immediately or be declared in violation of Council territorial sovereignty." Ambassador Wong felt a chill of recognition. The alien was essentially delivering an ultimatum despite the diplomatic language: submit or be treated as enemies. "Commander Zerkoth," Wong replied carefully, "we are here in good faith to establish peaceful relations between our species. However, we cannot accept terms that would compromise our security or sovereignty. Perhaps we could discuss alternative arrangements that would address both our concerns." "There are no alternatives." Zerkoth's response came back like crystalline ice cracking. "You will comply with Council authority or face the consequences of your defiance." That was when Captain Mackenzie's worst fears were realized. The alien destroyer suddenly accelerated, moving to bracket the human formation in a classic attack pattern. Their energy weapons began charging to full power and targeting systems locked onto the human vessels. "All ships, this is Resolute Actual," Mackenzie transmitted on the emergency frequency. "We have weapons lock from Council vessels. They appear to be moving into attack formation." On the diplomatic shuttle, Commander Martinez was already accelerating away from the alien cruiser as her sensors detected the same weapons signatures. "Ambassador, we need to get back to our ships. This is about to turn ugly." But they were too late. Defense Commander Zirkoth had apparently decided that a demonstration of Council power was necessary to put these primitive newcomers in their place. "Human vessels, you are ordered to stand down and prepare for boarding. Any attempt to flee will be considered an act of war." The first plasma bolt streaked across space from one of the Zephyrian destroyers, intended as a warning shot across the bow of the UES Defiant. Instead, it struck the frigate's forward shields with devastating effect, overloading the defensive systems and sending the ship spinning out of control. Captain Mackenzie watched in horror as his sister ship took the hit. The Defiant wasn't critically damaged, but the attack had been unprovoked and utterly without warning. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Chen," came the transmission from the Indomitable. "You are cleared to engage. Repeat, you are cleared to engage. Show these aliens what happens when they fire on human ships." What happened next would be remembered throughout the galaxy as the moment when the old order began to crumble. The UES Resolute opened fire with its primary kinetic weapons, launching a stream of tungsten penetrator rods at the attacking destroyer at significant fractions of light speed. The alien ship's elegant energy shields, designed to deflect plasma and particle beams, offered no protection whatsoever against chunks of metal moving at relativistic velocities. The destroyer simply disintegrated. One moment it was a graceful vessel of gossamer and light. The next it was an expanding cloud of debris and superheated gas. The second destroyer, seeing its companion destroyed in an instant, fired everything it had at the UES Defiant. Plasma bolts, particle beams, and some kind of exotic energy weapon that the human computers couldn't classify all struck the frigate simultaneously. But Captain Torres had spent the last 10 minutes adjusting his ship's defensive posture based on the initial attack. The Defiant's ablative armor, designed to survive impacts from debris at interstellar speeds, absorbed the energy weapons with minimal damage. The ship's point defense systems tracked and destroyed the physical projectiles the aliens fired, and when the exotic energy weapon hit, it was dispersed harmlessly through the ship's electromagnetic field generators. "Is that the best you can do?" Captain Torres transmitted to the alien destroyer as his ship's missile tubes opened. "Let us show you how humans say hello." The nuclear warheads that emerged from the Defiant were not the crude atomic weapons that the galaxy expected from a primitive species. They were sophisticated fusion devices with exotic matter cores designed to punch through energy shields by creating temporary gravitational distortions. When they detonated against the alien destroyer's hull, the results were spectacular. The second Zephyrian ship didn't simply explode. It was turned inside out as the warheads created miniature black holes that consumed the vessel's matter and converted it directly to energy before evaporating in bursts of Hawking radiation. Diplomatic envoy Keltharos, watching from his elegant cruiser as two military vessels were destroyed in less than 30 seconds, found himself facing a reality that challenged everything he thought he knew about galactic civilization. "Humans," he transmitted, his melodious voice now trembling with shock. We surrender. Please do not fire on our vessel. We are not military personnel." Ambassador Wong, still aboard the diplomatic shuttle as it raced back toward human lines, felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that the immediate threat was over, dread about what this would mean for human-alien relations going forward. "Envoy Keltharos," she replied, "we accept your surrender and will guarantee the safety of your vessel. However, this unprovoked attack on our diplomatic mission will require an immediate response from your government. We demand an explanation and reparations for the damage done to our ships." On the bridge of the UES Indomitable, Admiral Chen watched the tactical displays with satisfaction. The engagement had lasted less than 2 minutes, and humanity had demonstrated their capabilities in the clearest possible terms. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Maintain defensive positions, but stand ready for follow-up attacks. And get me a priority channel to Earth Command. They need to know that first contact has gone kinetic." As the news of the brief battle spread across the galaxy through the Council's quantum communication networks, the reaction was immediate and profound. On dozens of worlds, military commanders who had been dismissing humanity as primitive newcomers suddenly found themselves studying weapon signatures that defied everything they thought they knew about warfare. The humans had just demonstrated that their crude kinetic weapons could punch through energy shields that had protected Council ships for centuries. Their defensive systems had absorbed the most advanced weapons the galaxy could produce with minimal damage, and their nuclear devices had shown capabilities that bordered on the terrifying. But perhaps most disturbing of all was the tactical analysis that followed. The human ships had responded to the attack with a precision and coordination that suggested extensive combat experience. These weren't primitives stumbling around with dangerous toys. They were experienced warriors who knew exactly how to use their weapons for maximum effect. In the Council archives, ancient warnings that had been dismissed as mythology suddenly took on new urgency. References to humans as the species that turns every tool into a weapon and the race that fights with the fury of dying stars no longer seemed like colorful metaphors. They seemed like accurate intelligence reports. As Admiral Chen prepared her next transmission to the Galactic Council, she reflected on the words that had been spoken at the departure ceremony back on Earth. Humanity goes to the stars not as conquerors, but as equals. But if others mistake our desire for peace as weakness, they will learn that we have forgotten neither how to fight nor how to win. The galaxy was about to receive a very comprehensive education in human military doctrine. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives who had been debating humanity's arrival in theoretical terms just hours before now found themselves staring at tactical recordings of 2 advanced warships being destroyed with frightening ease. The chamber that usually echoed with dignified debate now buzzed with panic, anger, and something that many species hadn't felt in centuries: fear. High Arbiter Zakthul maintained his composure, but those who knew him well could see the strain in his translucent form. The battle recordings played on loop around the chamber, showing the human weapons cutting through Council defenses like they were made of paper. "The analysis is complete," announced Fleet Admiral Vorgak of the Combined Defense Forces, her mechanical components clicking with obvious agitation. The human vessels employed kinetic projectiles accelerated to 12% of light speed, nuclear devices with exotic matter cores, and point defense systems that our computers cannot fully analyze. "How is this possible?" demanded Representative Solkov, his bioluminescent patches flickering rapidly with distress. "Our intelligence suggested these beings were primitives using chemical propulsion and crude metallurgy." Zenith, who had been analyzing the human technology signatures since the battle, activated her translation matrix with unusual hesitation. "Honorable representatives, I believe we may have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of human technological development. What we interpreted as primitive technology may actually be sophisticated engineering designed to appear simple." "Explain," Zakthul commanded, his psychic presence pressing against the xenobiologist's mind. "Consider their weapon systems," Dr. Zenith continued, manipulating the holographic displays to show detailed breakdowns of the battle. "While we developed energy weapons because they are clean, efficient, and precise, humans appear to have perfected kinetic weapons to a degree we never imagined possible. Their projectiles carry more destructive force than our plasma cannons while being nearly impossible to intercept or deflect." "And their defenses?" asked Commander Veltar, whose wings had lost their usual lustrous sheen. "Brilliant in their simplicity," Dr. Zenith admitted reluctantly. Instead of energy shields that can be overloaded or bypassed, they use layered physical armor, designed to absorb and dissipate energy attacks. Their point defense systems appear to be based on rapidly tracking multiple targets and destroying them with precise kinetic interceptors. Representative Morgath of the Hive Collective buzzed with agitation. You speak as if their primitive approach is somehow superior to our advanced technology. In terms of combat effectiveness, Dr. Zenith replied grimly, it appears that it may be. Our weapons and defenses have evolved to counter other energy-based systems. The humans have developed countermeasures specifically designed to defeat energy shields and energy weapons. The implications hung in the chamber like a physical weight. For 3 millennia, the galaxy had moved beyond kinetic warfare, viewing it as crude and barbaric. The idea that such primitive weapons could be more effective than their sophisticated energy systems challenged the very foundation of galactic civilization. There is another matter, Doctor. Zenith continued, her tentacles moving nervously as she accessed deeper data files. The nuclear devices the humans employed were not simple fusion bombs. The energy signatures suggest they were somehow creating temporary gravitational anomalies, miniature black holes that consumed matter and then evaporated. This represents a level of exotic matter manipulation that even our most advanced species have only achieved in theoretical models. Impossible, declared Representative Quindar, her mechanical form sparking with disbelief. No species develops such advanced physics while still using kinetic weapons and chemical rockets. Unless, Zakthul said slowly, his form brightening as ancient memories stirred, they are not the primitives we assumed them to be. Search for references to species evolution patterns and technological deception. The central computer, a quantum intelligence that had served the Council for over 2,000 years, projected data that made several representatives recoil in shock. The files were old, some dating back to the very founding of the Council, and they described a theoretical type of species that the early explorers had feared encountering. The apex predator hypothesis, Zaktal read from the ancient files. A theoretical species that achieves galactic-level technology while maintaining the aggressive instincts and tactical thinking that allowed them to dominate their homeworld. Such a species would be uniquely dangerous because they would combine advanced technology with the strategic mindset of evolutionary survivors. Mythical nonsense, scoffed Commander Veltar, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Zaktul asked, manipulating the displays to show star charts of the human approach route. Look at their tactics. They didn't announce themselves with grand displays of technology or diplomatic overtures. They appeared at the edge of our space, assessed our defenses, and positioned themselves for maximum tactical advantage. When negotiations began, they refused to submit to our security protocols. Not out of ignorance, but because they recognized them as methods of establishing dominance. The chamber fell silent as the representatives processed this analysis. Everything about human behavior suddenly took on a different meaning when viewed through the lens of strategic thinking rather than primitive ignorance. "What are your recommendations, High Arbiter?" asked Admiral Vorgok, her mechanical components adjusting to defensive configurations. "We have 3 options," Zakthul replied, his form solidifying as he drew upon his full authority. "First, we can attempt to negotiate with the humans as equals, accepting that they represent a major power despite their apparent technological differences." "Unacceptable," interrupted Representative Sulkov. "The Council has never negotiated as equals with newcomers. It would set a dangerous precedent." Second, Zakthul continued, "We can demand their submission to Council authority and prepare for war if they refuse. Given their demonstrated capabilities, Dr. Zenith observed, that might be tantamount to species suicide for any forces we send against them."
Which brings us to the third option,
Zaktul said grimly. "We attempt to contain them to their current position while we develop countermeasures to their weapons and tactics." "How long would that take?" asked Commander Valtar. "Unknown," admitted Admiral Vorgak. "We would need to completely redesign our defensive systems to counter kinetic weapons, develop new shielding technologies, and create weapons capable of penetrating their armor systems. We're looking at decades of research and development. Decades we may not have," Zakthul pointed out. "The humans have 17 ships in our space now. What happens when they return with hundreds or thousands?" Meanwhile, aboard the UES Indomitable, Admiral Chen was dealing with her own strategic dilemmas. The easy victory over the Council ships had provided valuable intelligence about alien capabilities, but it had also escalated the situation far beyond what the mission planners had anticipated. "Admiral," reported Commander Torres, "we're intercepting massive amounts of military communications throughout the local systems. The aliens are mobilizing everything they have in this sector." "How much are we talking about?" Chen asked. "At least 300 vessels within a 12-light-year radius, probably more beyond our sensor range. If they decide to commit to a full assault, we'll be facing overwhelming numbers." Chen studied the tactical displays, weighing humanity's options. The original mission had called for reconnaissance and diplomatic contact, with the fleet returning to Earth to report their findings before any major commitments were made. But the situation had changed dramatically. "Any word from Earth Command?" she asked. "The quantum tunnel is still stable, and we're maintaining communication with Sol System. Earth Command is analyzing our battle reports and should have new orders within the next few hours. And our fuel situation? We've got enough antimatter for about 6 months of combat operations, assuming moderate engagement levels. If we have to fight a running battle back to the tunnel, we'll be cutting it close." Chen nodded grimly. Humanity's greatest advantage was also their greatest vulnerability. Their ships could operate independently for extended periods, but they were operating at the end of an enormous supply line. Every shot fired, every day spent in alien space brought them closer to the point where they would have to choose between retreat and destruction. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Hayes from the communication station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the aliens. It's coming from their central government, not the local military forces. Put it through." The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of High Arbiter Zakthul, his ethereal form radiating an authority that transcended species barriers. When he spoke, his words were carefully chosen and delivered with the weight of galactic civilization behind them. "Admiral Chen of Humanity, I am High Arbiter Zakthul, speaking for the Galactic Council. The recent engagement between our forces was the result of a tragic misunderstanding. We propose an immediate ceasefire and the establishment of formal diplomatic relations between our civilizations." Chen studied the alien leader carefully. Everything about his tone and demeanor suggested that this was not capitulation, but rather a strategic pause while both sides reassessed the situation. "High Arbiter Zakthul," Chen replied, "humanity accepts your proposal for a ceasefire. However, we require guarantees for the safety of our diplomatic personnel and reparations for the unprovoked attack on our vessels."
"Your terms are acceptable," Zaktul responded immediately, which told Chen that the aliens were far more concerned about the situation than they were letting on.
"We propose a formal meeting between our respective leadership to establish protocols for peaceful coexistence. Where and when?" Chen asked. "Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council, in 7 standard days. We will provide guarantees for your safe passage and return." Chen considered this carefully. Nexus Prime was deep in Council space, surrounded by their military forces and defensive installations. From a tactical standpoint, it was potentially a trap. From a diplomatic standpoint, it was exactly the kind of gesture of strength that would establish humanity as a major player on the galactic stage. "We accept," Chen decided, "but we'll be coming with a full escort and will maintain the right to withdraw from negotiations at any time." "Understood and agreed," Zakthul replied. "Until our meeting, Admiral." As the transmission ended, Chen turned to her bridge crew. "Signal Earth Command. Tell them we're going to need everything they can spare. We're about to walk into the heart of an alien empire, and I want them to know that humanity is not something they can dismiss or intimidate. The next few days would determine whether first contact between humanity and the galaxy would result in peaceful coexistence or the beginning of a war that could reshape the cosmic order." On both sides, military leaders prepared for the possibility that diplomacy might fail and force of arms would determine the future of interstellar civilization. Neither side fully understood what they were preparing to unleash upon the galaxy. The approach to Nexus Prime was unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. The capital world of the Galactic Council hung in space like a jewel, its surface covered in impossible spires that stretched from the planetary surface into orbital space. Massive ring structures encircled the planet at various altitudes, each one housing millions of beings from dozens of different species. The entire system hummed with the energy of a civilization that had been perfecting itself for millennia. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Indomitable, watching as her fleet of 17 ships moved through the outer system under the watchful sensors of hundreds of alien vessels. The Council had kept their word about safe passage, but the sheer scale of their military presence was a reminder that humanity was operating in the heart of a galactic empire. "Impressive," commented Ambassador Wang as she joined the Admiral at the viewport, "but also revealing. Look at those defensive platforms." Chen followed the ambassador's gaze to the massive weapons installations that guarded the approaches to Nexus Prime. Each platform was larger than humanity's biggest space stations, bristling with energy weapons and protected by shields that glowed visibly against the vacuum of space. "All energy weapons," Chen observed. "And look at those shield generators. They're huge, complex, and probably incredibly powerful against anything they were designed to stop. But useless against kinetic bombardment," Wang concluded. "They've built their entire defensive strategy around fighting other energy weapon users, which tells us something very important about galactic warfare," Chen added. "For all their technology, they've become specialized. They've optimized their military systems for fighting wars the way they think wars should be fought." The communication array crackled to life as they received routing instructions from planetary control. The voice was crisp, professional, and utterly alien in its harmonics. "Human fleet, you are cleared for orbital insertion at coordinates 77 Mark IV. Diplomatic Shuttle Bay 17 has been prepared for your delegation." "Acknowledged, Nexus Control," Commander Torres responded from the bridge. "Human diplomatic shuttle departing in 20 minutes. As the human delegation prepared for the historic meeting, similar preparations were taking place in the council chambers far below. High Arbiter Zoctul reviewed the intelligence reports one final time, trying to understand exactly what humanity represented and how the galaxy should respond to their presence. The data painted a picture that was both fascinating and terrifying. Analysis of the human ships revealed technology that was simultaneously crude and sophisticated, primitive in its basic principles but advanced in its execution to a degree that challenged everything the Council thought they knew about technological development.
Their fusion drives, reported Dr.
Zenith as she presented her final analysis to the assembled Council leadership, are actually more efficient than our quantum drives for sustained operations. While we can achieve higher peak velocities, their systems can operate continuously for years without the exotic matter requirements that limit our operational range. "And their defensive systems?" asked Commander Veltar. "Ingenious in their simplicity. They've created layered armor that can absorb energy attacks, dissipate thermal weapons, and even deflect exotic matter bombardment. It's heavy. It requires massive structural support, but it's also incredibly effective against every weapon system we've developed." Representative Quindar's mechanical form clicked with agitation. "How can such primitive approaches be superior to our advanced technologies?" "Because," Zoctul interrupted, his form brightening as he accessed deeper analytical processes, "they didn't develop their technology to be elegant or efficient. They developed it to win wars. Every system on their ships is designed with combat as the primary consideration." The implications of this were staggering. Galactic civilization had spent centuries optimizing their technology for peacetime operations, creating systems that were clean, efficient, and capable of supporting vast interstellar empires. The humans had apparently spent the same time optimizing for warfare, creating technology specifically designed to destroy other spacecraft and survive in hostile environments. "There's something else," Dr. Zenith added, manipulating the displays to show detailed scans of the human vessels. "Their ships aren't just warships, they're also incredibly sophisticated mobile habitats. They have complete manufacturing facilities, hydroponic gardens, closed-loop life support systems, and what appears to be on-board educational facilities for training new crew members. They're colony ships, Representative Sulkov realized with growing alarm. These aren't just military vessels, they're mobile civilizations, which means Zaktul concluded grimly that the 17 ships we're seeing may represent the advance guard of a much larger migration. They're not just exploring our space, they're preparing to claim it. As these revelations sank in, the human diplomatic shuttle was completing its approach to the designated docking bay. Ambassador Wang reviewed her briefing materials one final time, aware that the next few hours might determine the future relationship between humanity and the galaxy. The greeting party that met them was impressive both in its diversity and its obvious symbolism. Representatives from a dozen different species stood in the vast docking bay, each one a testament to the Council's commitment to peaceful coexistence and mutual understanding. At the center of the group stood High Arbiter Zakthul himself, his ethereal form radiating authority and ancient wisdom. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," Zaktul said as the human delegation approached, his voice carrying easily across the vast space through psychic amplification. "I am High Arbiter Zaktul, and on behalf of the Galactic Council, I greet humanity as we take the first steps toward mutual understanding." "High Arbiter," Ambassador Wang replied with a diplomatic bow that had been carefully calculated to show respect without submission. "I am Ambassador Patricia Wang representing humanity and the United Earth Government. We come in the spirit of peaceful coexistence and mutual respect." "Excellent," Zaktul replied, gesturing toward a nearby transport that would carry them to the council chambers. "However, before we proceed with formal negotiations, there are certain matters we must discuss regarding humanity's intentions in our space." As they traveled through the impossible architecture of Nexus Prime, Ambassador Wang found herself both amazed and deeply concerned by what she saw. The city was a masterpiece of engineering and artistry, with buildings that defied conventional physics and transportation systems that seemed to operate on principles humanity had barely theorized about. But she also noticed things that her military training had taught her to look for. The civilian population moved through carefully controlled channels, their activities monitored by sophisticated surveillance systems. The architectural marvels were built around defensive strongpoints that could be sealed and defended if necessary. This wasn't just a capital city, it was a fortress designed to control and, if necessary, intimidate anyone who entered it. "Impressive," Wang commented as they passed through a district where crystalline beings worked alongside energy creatures and various biological species in apparent harmony. "Your civilization has achieved remarkable integration among diverse species. The Council has brought peace and prosperity to over 10,000 worlds," Zaktul replied with obvious pride. "Each species contributes their unique capabilities to the greater good of galactic civilization." "And what happens to species that prefer not to contribute?" Wang asked carefully. The slight pause before Zakthul answered told her everything she needed to know. "The Council has always found that mutual cooperation benefits everyone involved," he replied diplomatically. "We have never encountered a species that couldn't find a place within our framework once they understood the benefits of membership. The council chambers were even more impressive than the rest of the city. A vast amphitheater that could accommodate thousands of beings in an environment carefully designed to promote peaceful discourse." But Wang noticed that the seating arrangements placed the council leadership in positions of obvious authority, looking down upon the area where visiting delegations would stand. Ambassador Wang, Zaktul began as they took their places. "While we regret the misunderstanding that led to hostilities, we are concerned about humanity's apparent military capabilities and intentions." Wang had expected this opening. The Council was testing her, trying to determine whether humanity could be intimidated into accepting a subordinate position. "High Arbiter," she replied. "Humanity regrets the loss of life that occurred during that encounter. However, we must point out that Council forces opened fire on our diplomatic mission without provocation. We defended ourselves as any sovereign species has the right to do." "Sovereign species," Zaktul repeated, his form shifting slightly. that raises important questions about humanity's place in the galactic community. The Council has maintained order for millennia through a careful balance of authority and cooperation. New species typically undergo a period of integration before achieving full independence. High Arbiter, Wong said, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's history, we appreciate your offer of integration, but humanity has not come to the stars seeking protection or guidance. We seek trade, cultural exchange, and peaceful coexistence among equals. The word equals sent ripples of reaction through the assembled council members. It was a claim that challenged the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. Ambassador, Commander Veltar interjected, her wings creating patterns of agitation. With respect, humanity's technology, while impressive in certain areas, hardly qualifies your species as equals to civilizations that have been traveling between stars for millennia. Wong smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several council members distinctly uncomfortable. Commander Veltar, she replied, perhaps you would be interested in a demonstration of human engineering capabilities. With the High Arbiter's permission, we would like to present a gift to the Council, a small token of humanity's technological achievements. Zakthul considered this request carefully. Any demonstration would reveal more about human capabilities, but it would also give the Council valuable intelligence about their true technological level. We would be honored to receive such a gift, he decided. Wong activated a small communicator that connected her to the human fleet in orbit. Admiral Chen, please deploy package Alpha 7 to the coordinates I'm transmitting. High above Nexus Prime, the UES Indomitable released a small probe that descended rapidly through the planet's atmosphere. But this wasn't just any probe, it was a demonstration of human manufacturing capabilities that had been specifically designed for this moment. As the device landed in the Council chamber's central area, it began to unfold like a flower made of metal and light. Within minutes, it had assembled itself into a small but complete manufacturing facility, complete with molecular assemblers, power generation systems, and raw material processors. This device, Wong explained as the council members stared in fascination, can produce any manufactured good that humanity has designed, using nothing but basic raw materials. It represents our approach to space exploration. Complete self-sufficiency and the ability to establish civilization anywhere we choose to go. The implications were staggering. The device represented technology that the Council could theoretically match, but only with massive industrial installations and exotic matter supplies. The humans had compressed the same capabilities into a package small enough to carry aboard their ships. Moreover, Wong continued, each of our ships carries dozens of these devices, along with the blueprints for everything from basic tools to advanced starship components. We don't just travel between stars, we bring our entire civilization with us. Zaktul processed this information with growing understanding. The humans weren't just exploring or even colonizing, they were demonstrating the ability to establish independent industrial civilizations anywhere they chose to land. They were showing the Council that humanity couldn't be controlled through economic dependence or technological superiority. Ambassador Wong, he said carefully, you have given us much to consider. Perhaps we should discuss specific terms for peaceful coexistence between our civilizations. The negotiations that followed lasted for 3 days and established the framework for what would become known as the Terran Accords. Humanity was recognized as a sovereign species with full rights to their current territorial claims and the freedom to expand into unclaimed regions of the galaxy. In exchange, humans agreed to respect Council territorial boundaries and to participate in joint scientific and cultural exchange programs. But the real victory for humanity was something that wasn't written in any treaty. The galaxy had been forced to acknowledge that the age of Council dominance was coming to an end. Other species, inspired by humanity's successful assertion of independence, began questioning their own relationships with the galactic government. As Admiral Chen's fleet prepared to return to Earth with news of their success, she reflected on the changes that First Contact had brought about. Humanity had not only secured their place among the stars, they had fundamentally altered the balance of power that had defined galactic civilization for millennia. "Signal Earth Command," she ordered as the UES Indomitable began its journey home. "Tell them we've achieved all primary objectives. The galaxy knows that humanity has arrived and they know we're not going anywhere." The response from Earth came quickly. "Acknowledged, Admiral. The Second Fleet has already been authorized for construction. Welcome to the galactic community." As the human ships accelerated toward the quantum tunnel that would carry them home, they left behind a galaxy that was no longer quite as certain about its own future. The age of myths and legends was over. The age of humanity among the stars had begun, and in the deepest archives of the Galactic Council, ancient protocols began activating that hadn't been used in over 3,000 years, protocols designed for the one scenario that the Council's founders had hoped would never come to pass: the return of a species that refused to be ruled.